Good to
Thanks,
see
man.
you, man.
Yep. Is this on? Yep.
It's on. You're on.
Awesome.
I'm on. Well, John, I got to get you to the ministry of availability, but first, I want you to talk about your family. Tell us about your family, and then we're going to go back and forth, and then a little differently, given how things go today, we'll take interaction from you. So think of questions, and you can grill the madman here. Okay, John, tell us about your family.
Well, hey, first of all, it's a privilege to be here, man. I got to tell you, I've got a lot of emotion sitting here. There's a lot of hey, Scott. There's a lot of I've got a lot of memories here. Both of my kids were born and baptized here. They both went to school for 13 years at Orangewood Christian School. We've celebrated many weddings, after the wedding in here, and a number of celebration services for folks that have passed. So it's an interesting time to be here, and I'm grateful for just this opportunity to see so many familiar faces and just have this opportunity to visit with you all. So so I am a husband to Cindy, and Cindy and I have been married about 38 years now, and
38
years. Yeah, 38 years. I got married later in life. Yeah, and
That's awesome.
It's true. And
30.
Yeah, 38 years, and dad to Carly and Chris, who's my son. Carly is 34. She's married to my other son, Matt, and they are expecting their first child in December.
Awesome.
So I'm excited about that, and I'm I guess what's known now as a bonus grandfather as well, because Matt had a 8-year-old daughter. So I have a bonus grandchild as well. So it's a fantastic thing. And,
That's great.
And Chris is married to my other daughter, Morgan. And so I get to be dad to 4 kids. And curiously enough, both of my kids' spouses have lost their father. So I think the Lord has given me a unique opportunity to kind of do what I do and be a dad to them too. So my tribe got bigger as a dad, just with them getting married, and so it's really good. Still have my mom is still around. She's 94 years old. Lives over in the towers in Winter Park, and still going. She's going. She's not going strong, but she's going.
Stage of life, man.
Stage of life.
You're in it at all the levels,
That's
as
right.
are we, with so many different levels of life. You guys can relate to that for sure. So these guys that would come to me would always talk about this ministry of. You're a business guy. What's this ministry of availability? Tell us about your business, what you've done in business, and then the ministry of availability.
Yeah. So I've had the privilege of I kind of think about things from a standpoint of a continuum of time in the marketplace. A lot of you guys that have maybe spent some time with me over the years have heard me say that versus a career. I've never really been a guy that's thought in terms of career. So I've had this privilege of having this continuum to be able to have multiple stops along that continuum where the Lord has given me and invited me into different venues, if you will, in different business sectors. I still see the marketplace as my mission field, if you will, the opportunity to engage with folks. So I've gone all the way from working for a family right out of the gate to spending 13 years in the corporate world doing national sales, to moving out of that, which was a definitive time when I kind of shifted into this discovery of this ministry, where the Lord led me to a local company here. Many of you guys know Westbrook. It's an AC plumbing and electrical company on OBT between Bad and Worse across some Clio's. Yeah. So Clio's, they got buffet there. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So anyway, so I go from this corporate world and running Westbrook for 12 years, and then handed the baton off there about 12 years ago, and had the privilege of stepping into a company up here in Longwood, Insurance Office of America, primarily as a result of having done this availability thing. So that's kind of how all that came about. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not a plumber.
Not a plumber. Yeah, I'm not a plumber. That's for sure. But
And you're not an insurance sales guy.
I'm not an insurance sales guy. I'm just a guy that wants to leverage the marketplace to bring the value of the contributions that I can bring to the table for not only a business, but most importantly for the people in the business and the marketplace in general. Yeah. So I've always looked at my work as and you guys have heard others say this, as a platform to do ministry, and it's never, it's really not been a job for me. It's just been a platform that I've had the opportunity and privilege to engage with the lives of a lot of people along the way.
All right. So is that clear? I mean, have you ever asked your dad, Dad, what do you do? And he explained it, and you just kind of went, okay, I don't. So
we could spend an hour and a half, and I could go through all that with you.
I know. We don't have that much time.
Yeah.
But I love this. Obviously, you have a deep faith. You're a thinker, and it's not just about making money. You understand the gospel, and that your role in the greater Orlando area has been to influence particularly men. I mean, your ministry of availability hasn't been primarily with women, has it?
No, it's men. It's men. But again,
that's why you've been married 38 years.
Yeah. I will say there was a time in about 15, 16 years ago, I gave a little talk to a gathering of CEOs, and there was 16 men in the group, 2 women. And at the very end, the 2 women walked up to me and said, "Hey, we heard what you said about just meeting with men. Would you be willing to meet with 2 of us at once?" So I will tell you, if I had the time to tell you how the Lord took that inflection point in my life to basically bring healing to myself, bring healing to my wife. And it's a whole nother story, but it's a beautiful story of how God is going to, it was 2, but it was great. Started meeting with them, and it was just phenomenal. So,
wow.
So just to be specific, so what do I do in the world? So in the corporate, in my work, I do culture, I do strategy, I do, just helping shepherd leaders, helping unleash the potential in emerging leaders. That's kind of it's my heartbeat. So I have the privilege and the blessing to be able to do that. So
good.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, as we at Forge interact on the whole idea of growth, a lot of us realize as men we don't think deeply enough about our life. You help people think more deeply about you help guys delve in to thinking more. That's what your ministry of availability is.
Part of and I wish Brother John Smith was here. I don't see him, but he and I have had this back and forth on this term ministry of availability for a long time, and I know John has been very, very faithful to put himself in that position for years upon years. So I wish he was here to be able to see him. But for me, the ministry of availability for me is, simply put, it's to leave time in everything that I do to meet with men with no agenda, to give them a safe place, to give them a judgment-free zone, and to help them basically do one of 3 or 4 things: kind of navigate life out the front window, kind of help them get from here to there. Most men know where they're at. Fewer men know where they want to get to, and kind of help them see around the corner of life a little bit. And oftentimes what I've found of late is, over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, I've had a lot of opportunity to help men kind of navigate a vision for life that's greater than themselves, which has really begun to help. What I've found over my years, 23 years now doing this ministry of availability, 3 types of men have emerged that I've seen, that I've been engaged with over time. You have, and they all arrive at the same station on 3 different tracks. One guy wakes up and he goes, I just did 1 year 30 times over. Is this all there is? Or a guy wakes up and he goes, I've achieved everything I possibly thought I ever wanted to achieve. Is this all there is? And then the third guy basically wakes up one day and realizes, I'll never be the man I thought I was going to be. Is this all there is? So men get stuck, and part of my passion and purpose, I think, is to help guys get from here to there, help them get unstuck by helping them gain maybe a bit of a vision for the first time that for their life and perhaps something that it would actually extend beyond their death. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of a
We've
little
all
bit in a nutshell.
we've all been stuck at one point. If we will admit it, we've been stuck, but did we get unstuck? We might have some stuck guys here today. You mentioned some interesting things to me when we talked about what guys are running from, or how do you articulate
that? So what I've learned over the years, then this is just an observation in my own life and reflecting in my own life and looking into the lives of others. I've had this opportunity to engage with men. Is that I kind of say it this way that many men spend their life's energy on who they're not, living in fear of being found out, not of some egregious sin, but that the person they see in the mirror that they're wrestling with every day, that guy that they're wrestling with is not the guy that they represent themselves to be out there, which is tantamount, if you will, to kind of being chased by a lie, being chased by this false persona. And it's like running a race with no finish line. And suffice it to say that that's an exhausting race. And it's absolutely exhausting. So it's this idea of just a lot of it is again, I think a lot of men are more driven by actually what they're running from than what they're actually attracted to. And oftentimes in a man's life, I know it was in my life that, I was driven by having heard in a resounding voice, you're not good enough, you're not perfect, you're never going to make it. I never heard I'm proud of you. So that said to me, I'm not proud of you. Again, you could say this is some, the father wound a little bit. A lot of us have that, but it comes in a lot of forms and fashions, right? But the outside world will oftentimes look at someone and say, gosh, I know in the world of sales, they'll look at a sales guy and go, that guy right there is driven by money. The truth of the matter is he's not driven by money. He's driven by trying to prove something to someone that never affirmed him. Is what my experience has been, and I'm observing this. So my objective and my heartbeat is to show up again with no agenda and to basically feed the hungry heart with an authentic love, and just I believe that authenticity is probably the most foreign language in the world that men are desperate to speak and to hear. And
say that again.
I think authenticity is the most foreign language in the world that men and people are most desperate to hear and to learn how to speak. And I know some of you all have heard this before, probably in this church from the pulpit from years past. I recall, this notion that if you spent your life's energy perpetuating a false persona, you've lived life behind the veil, right? We've talked a lot about that over the years as men. But the key to that is the mask, right? And if you live life behind the mask, only the mask gets loved. So think about it. We have a society of men who have never known love below the surface. And by extension, you can't give what you've never been given. So we don't know how to give it. So to the degree that you meet with another man and offer them that authentic love, you're giving food to the starving, encouragement to the starving, if you will, and it has generational cascading effects, because as a man begins to receive love and can now give love below the mask, by extension, his generations past, future will begin to see and know, maybe pick up a little bit of that. Generational sin certainly works in one way, but generational good works that way too. So it flows downhill too, or uphill.
Yeah.
So
what do you mean by generational sin?
Well, I'm going to be careful with it, right? So I just think about, for me, I'm just going to say it this way. There, I chose, at the point at which I became a dad, I chose to be a first generation cycle breaker, right? Because I had recognized that my earthly father had been formed by the construct of a world and his worldview was formed by what he was raised in, and he wasn't equipped to be the dad I needed him to be, although he was a provider. So I learned to be a provider, but there was a lot of things that I learned that I didn't want to perpetuate. So I kind of look at that and say, you know, sin of another kind in one sense, I mean, I don't want to get into the depths of all that, but just the idea that it cascades. Right?
If you don't break the cycle,
Yeah.
we carry on what we were raised with as well.
Well, we think so oftentimes, we think about it in the terms of the egregious sin, but look, I mean, you can, if to the degree that your framework and your construct is to be driven by approval, to the degree that you pass that on, that's going to continue down the line, unless somewhere along the line you break it, and you again. You do the best you can. I'll be the first to admit, if my son were in here, Tony's in here, but he knows my son. But I tell you, there's vestiges of me and my son. There's vestiges of my father and my son. It's nowhere near what's in me, but it's still there. And I'm hoping as time goes on, it will over time wean itself and weed itself out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Wow. That's why we need to have this kind of intentionality in terms of growth. The key thing is, Jon, all of this, the idea of loving, seeking to intentionally love other guys. I don't think we tend to think in terms of our ministry and their lives as in that way. But that's a real gospel thing. I mean, if it weren't for the gospel of Jesus, you would never be thinking this way. Pagans don't think this way.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think I look at it as from the standpoint of, we're all given a front row seat to engage the lives of others. The Lord has given us a front row seat, and he's I think given us an admonition and encouragement to lean in and what the verse in Philippians, right? Whatever you've seen in me, learned of me, received from me, heard of me, put it into practice.
Yeah.
Well, you got two choices, right? I kind of think about it sometimes. When you pull up and you've got the guy on the side of the road with a sign, and I oftentimes see myself with that sign, and I've got a choice. The sign can say, keep what, and I've got the windows rolled up, keep what you have or share with me. Well, I think it's incumbent upon us, and the call is to give away what we've been given, right? And that comes in a lot of different forms and fashions, but it's not an option, if you will.
But Jon, okay, let's talk honestly. You're not even an ordained minister like I am. You're just a businessman.
I'm an ordained elder in this church.
All right, that's better. I mean, we have certain grace that's given to us at ordination that you don't have. I'm kidding, all right? I'm kidding. So what I hear you saying is that this is really, any Christian man can do this and should do this.
It's not, I think it's a calling, it's a, look, there's oftentimes, again, when I go back to guys that are stuck, oftentimes men don't have a vision for something that's greater than themselves, right? And so
that.
When you get outside of yourself and you begin to see that it's about one anothering, it's about taking and giving away what's been given to you. It's all of the things that we know to be true from Scripture, where, the encouragement and the promise is, if you give, you'll be blessed, not just some prosperity stuff, but just you'll receive blessing.
Yeah.
Right. And hey, get in the back of the line to be first in the line, if you will, and love another person. Look, it's pretty clear that, the call is to love one another. I think there's two commands, and that's the second one, big commands. So at any rate, yeah, I don't know that it's an option, if you will.
I love that.
Yeah.
And the reality is that we are blessed more than anybody else as we enter into other guys' lives and make a positive difference. That we're the beneficiary. Getting below the mask, loving a guy. How did you say that? Beneath the mask, that's a difficult thing because we all do wear masks. How do you get beyond that with a guy?
Well, I think you lead with transparency. That's the way I think about it. You invite people in your story, and what I've learned over the years is that as you invite people into your story, irrespective of your story, they will see something of themselves in your story. And I think about 2 Corinthians, the 12. I know for me, I always read through 12:9a, and it's like, it's the thorn in the flesh. Paul's like, hey, take it away, take it away, take it away. And it's like, nope, not going to do it. But my grace is sufficient for you. I'll perfect my strength in your weakness. I stopped right there, and I kept wondering, why on earth am I still struggling, right? But I realized that only read through 12:9a. And 12:9b appropriates the promise of the verse, which is to say, after my grace is sufficient for you, I'll perfect my strength in your weakness. Paul says 4 words. Paul will therefore boast all the more. So I'm going to, so as to rest in your strength. So my interpretation of that in my own life is I'm going to lead with transparency. I'm going to invite people into my story. And when I do, almost by across the board, there's something that someone will see in your story. And that's the moment at which you've been given the gateway to perhaps enter into their heart or enter into a conversation at a minimum that's going to be radically different than most conversations you might have at a surface level, perhaps for years with people, right?
Getting below the surface level.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do it, right? You ultimately, but you have to be the one to lead that. You have to lead with transparency. You have to lead with vulnerability, because that's part of creating a safe place for one another is to give folks an insight, to lead with your willingness to share, right? And to take the mask off and to say, hey, I need to be loved. I've only known love at the surface. Will you love me? Invite them in. And then you don't, and it's crazy what happens, as you begin to do that. And whenever I made the transition from my corporate world to ultimately what became Westbrook, it was a journey that was a discovery, which ultimately led to this culmination, this ministry of availability. And I looked at my existing role in the corporate world and overlaid the template of what it would take for me to be available, and that role was incongruent with my availability filters, if you will. So I left. I took a sabbatical. Some people say you quit your job, and I said no. I took a sabbatical with a 7 and a 10-year-old, right at the time, right. But I just took my story to the marketplace and invited people in. It took 5.5 months was my sabbatical. Didn't know how long it was going to last, but I had a resume. I never once pulled it out. I said, can I just invite you into my story? Curiously enough, I had 12 job offers. I wasn't looking for a job. I had one phone call that ultimately led me to Westbrook. But what was really curious was, I remember there was a senior executive for a company out of California that came and met with me, and I'm sharing my story with him. He starts weeping. And he says, Jon, I'll give you a job, but I know that's not what you want. Can you help me find what you found? And so I believe the power is in the story. It's, to me, we talk a lot about stewardship, right? Time, talent, treasure. Well, there's at least a couple more parts to that stool. One being influence. I think we're all given a measure of influence that we're called upon to leverage on the behalf of other people, and secondly, our story. To not only protect the integrity of our story, but to invite people into our story, because the story in and of itself, unless you invite people in, may never be heard. You have to invite people in. It's like you're a living book, right? I mean, people will take a book off the shelf and sometimes they'll read it, Rarely will they do anything with it. But if you're a living book and you invite people in, you open the cover, and again, with a measure of discretion, right, over time. But as you get to know folks. But at any rate, that's kind of the way I think about it.
So we talk about evangelism, and the Bible says share the gospel, and it sounds like what you have done is you have allowed. It's in some of my language. It sounds like you have allowed God to love you at a deep level, so that you understood you were His son, forgiven, accepted, regardless of what you got growing up in the home, and that gave you freedom then to move into other people's lives, particularly other men's lives, to share your story and disarm yourself, so that they could then kind of pull the mask away.
Well,
so I don't know if John's not playing a game, I don't have to play a game. That's what it sounds like to me.
The best way to take the energy out of the lie is to basically tell the truth. And the truth is my story. So can I invite you in? When I invite you in and tell you the construct of some of the, I could go through a whole conversation with you all about how shame had a direct effect on taking the person that I believe God ultimately designed me to be, to creating me this true self to a false self. Not that the false self is bad, but it was necessary to stay safe, right? So shame played a role for me becoming a person over here that again, it's not a negative thing at all, but it's the nature of how shame, not guilt. I think guilt is something we put on ourselves. Shame is what other people put on us, right? But it's how that influenced this person that I believe God designed me to be, to ultimately to become this person, so as to stay safe. So as I begin to, and again, it's not bad. For instance, I can tell you, I had to be hyper vigilant in my home because I had to always be in anticipation of let's say my dad's volatility, right? Let's just leave it at that. And when you're always in anticipation, guess what? It makes you very strategic, because you know how to look around to see around the corner, and you're always seeing around the corner. You know that right back there is all of the stuff for this thing, and right over there is this light, and that there's 2 cameras. It's all this kind of stuff. You just know, because you become hyper vigilant, even though in your true self, man, I think I'm a pretty calm dude, but over here, man, I can get anxious,
Yeah.
right?
And that's why we wear masks, because you're hyper vigilant. You got to prepare. You've got to protect yourself.
You do.
You got to survive.
Yeah, but part of the decoding that is understanding. For me, part of the healing, which I believe a lot of healing is a big piece for a lot of us. It's hard to move forward if you don't get unstuck from the past, right? So, but the healing, part of the healing for me has been in the understanding. So, and I can look at, there's biblical truth, and there's things that you find out. There's a wonderful, I don't know if you guys have ever heard about the theory of compensation. There was a Jewish psychologist in the early 1900s that his name was Alfred Adler, and he coined this idea, the theory of compensation. You just think about it, right? And here's the basic tenet: out of your struggles in life, this is a beautiful promise from a layman, right? Out of your struggles in life will come the discovery of some of your greatest gifts. Mm-hmm. My struggle of having to be vigilant gave me a tremendous gift that, guess what? People pay me to use, right? And you can just go down the line. But that to me is a tremendous promise. When you think about that in your own life, you think about that in the life of your kids, life of your grandkids, you see struggles across the board. There's hope in the reality that there is a gift around the corner,
All right, we want to invite you guys into the conversation, and so think of some questions here. But yeah, I gotta get. There's so much that we've covered, but talk. You and I were talking. We talked about the worn sap illustration. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I have no idea if that applies here, but I liked it. Can you leverage to that?
Well, yeah. I don't know that it does apply, but sometimes it's just more of a joke than anything. But oftentimes, um, people will say after we've met, and just thanking me and stuff and this, and I'll say, hey, it's a little bit like Warren Sapp after the Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl that the Tampa Bay Bucks won. The commentator stuck the phone in front of Warren and said, hey, Warren, what was the secret to your success? What made the difference for you today? And he simply said, I did what I do. And so I just tell people I did what I do.
I love it.
And it's a beautiful thing to be able to. This is again back to the idea of a continuum, because when you walk this out now for 23 years, there is a quantum impact that occurs over time.
Yeah.
In particular, if you're the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and you're the same guy through all of it, I tell people I'm a gazillionaire. And when I look at it through the lens of the currency of life, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
I do want to say this though, because I want to make a point, because this is just maybe a side note, but having the privilege of engaging with a lot of men over 23 years now. Some number of years ago, I sat at a restaurant in College Park, eating by myself, and very rarely do I eat by myself, but this particular day I did, and I wrote on a napkin, because from the outside world looking in, people would go, "Gosh, you're flush with relationships, you're flush with friendship, you're flush with people, all this stuff." From the outside world looking in, that's what they see. I wrote on the paper, the napkin, in the abundance of relationships, I find myself profoundly lonely. Now, it's curious because to the outside world looking in, isolation and solitude look identical. So very rarely are we going to actually wade in. We're just going to say, oh, that person likes to be alone. Someone might have looked at me that day and gone, oh, he just loves to eat alone. Truth is, I hate to eat alone, right? So I looked at that question and I thought, oh my gosh, what on earth? What's? I then put, so what's missing? To me, one of the best inventory questions a man can ask himself. You want to begin to get after how you can turn the table on living on your heels to live on your toes, living in a deficit position to living out of an abundance of fruit in your life. Inventory what's missing and turn that on to, okay, how do I solve for that? But this is what I initially put. I put, well, I'm not as funny as I used to be. I'm not as spontaneous as I used to be. I'm not as adventurous as I used to be. And then I thought, you know what? That's just symptomatic of a much deeper underlying root cause. And I ultimately wrote that there were the intimacy of friendship is, and I defined the definition of that for me. And I just want to share this with you, because as you all think about what you do week in and week out here, you think about what's it look like to be intimate in a friendship with another man. I will tell you that at that particular time, I was just on the heels of losing my refrigerator friend. Many of you all know who are here, Scott Alexander. He and I had spent 19 years together and over 7,000 hours as friends. And I looked, and so I basically put down on the napkin, this is what was missing: a desire to be pursued, desire to be understood, not agreed with, simply understood. In fact, just give me a place to process out loud, right? You and I have talked about this, I don't need you to agree with me. Let's just talk, So pursued, understood, fully known. What the juxtaposition for me was, I didn't want to be known well known. I had a lot of people that knew me. I wanted to be known well. I wanted to be fully known, because for me, that's the safest place as a man, fully known. Hard to get there, but it's the safest place. And then the beauty of that is, if you know me fully, that means you don't judge me. And that gives me freedom. And the fact that you don't judge me must mean you love me. And the fact that you love me must encourage you to pursue me. And then when you pursue me, you understand me. And it's this beautiful picture of a kind of, I don't know if you call it ecosystem or what, but I'm telling you, it's a beautiful picture. It's regenerative, and it doesn't stop. The energy is so huge if those things are in place for me. Intimacy, a friendship as a man, I would just tell you those are 5 things that for me were absolutely critical as I answered that question. So what's missing?
That's great. Comments from the floor. I'll repeat them, and then you can ask them. Comments, input, questions. Greatest failure and how you overcame it. Boy,
you talking to Pete?
Let me get my pen out. Yeah.
You looked at Pete, man.
No,
I didn't see you.
No,
I didn't even see you. You know what? So I'll give you one that comes to my mind. So July 10th, 1979, I had a man who was engaged in a project for this family that I was working with. He was a McKinsey consultant doing work there, and I walked past his office, and he said, "Hey, come have a seat." So July 10th, 1979, I was 23 years old. So if you back that math up, I'll be 67 next week. So that doesn't have anything to do with failure, but I'm just sharing it with you. I'm just telling you how far back it was, right? So this guy became the father that my dad wasn't equipped to be. Okay? And this is, I want to tell you, my dad was a provider. I'm not slamming, my dad was a provider, right? But this man was able to be the father my dad was not equipped to be in my life. He showed me how to integrate my faith in the marketplace. He showed me how to bring love into the marketplace. He showed me how to impute value in the lives of one and another person by simply listening and asking them questions. What do you think? Tell me about yourself. Simple questions. But I watched this guy, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is phenomenal. Now, he actually, as a consultant, he got paid to ask questions, but I'm like, this is crazy, but it was a beautiful thing. So you fast forward the film, he and I had the privilege to work alongside one another for about 5 years. He had bought a couple businesses that he let me run, so he entrusted quite a bit of responsibility to me, and there was an opportunity that, let's just say, a family member on the brother-in-law side got me into, and I told my mentor about it, right? But I didn't tell him the whole story. So let's just say he invested in it without knowing the whole story, as in the story being, I profit if he invests, okay? Why I didn't tell him, I can't tell you, man. I just can't tell you. But I will tell you that there was a day when I walked in his office and he says to me, well, I realize that you can live on your own. He goes, my plan had been to give you these companies, but I realize you don't need me. And so to me, it was this unbelievable sense of where I had basically, what's a good word? I mean, he had loved me so deeply, and I had hurt him so much, and that was a huge failure. I will tell you, that's one of the things that I look back and I say, gosh, if I could get that back, it would be amazing. But the beautiful thing about it is, he flipped the table on me and he said, I'm moving back to Arizona. We're going to sell everything. You can handle yourself, but I love you, man. and I'll always love you. And till the day he died 4 years ago, he still loved me. And I still had the privilege of seeing him. He got to a place where he didn't have anything to give me anymore, offered, advice because I wanted to talk to him, right? But all of that to say that was huge. So I guess with that, one thing I learned was in any conversation we typically have, any interaction we typically have, the best question to ask at the end is, what's the remaining 10% we need to talk about? There's always more that needs to be said. And that 10% is typically where life becomes full, if that makes sense. Yeah. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah. Wow. Keith.
Can you give us an example of where you know that God showed up in your life, what was beyond your own efforts?
Where God showed up in your life beyond your own efforts.
Yeah. So I can. June 1989, I'm in San Jose, California, in a hotel, and I wake up at 3:30 in the morning with a panic attack. I'd never had a panic attack before. I didn't even know what it was. Now, I had a proclivity to be anxious as a child, and I knew that. But the earmarks of what that was not this. It was something significant. And just to frame it, my role at the time was a national account manager leading a team of 24 salespeople around the country handling AT&T. That was my account for 13 years for a company, Hitachi Corporation, selling these big mainframe computers, So I reported directly into a senior level executive. It was the highest visible account we had in the company for what we were doing. Here I am with this panic attack. All I knew was I needed to get on that airplane and get home. So I start dialing for dollars. I get on an airplane at 5:30 in the morning. I sit down. I'm like, oh, I'm better. I get home. I'm better. Had to travel the next week. I got on the airplane, and they said, hey, we're getting ready to close the door or whatever. My bags are packed. I jumped off. I got off. So my bags went to wherever it was going. I had to get them back. Next week, I go to the gate. I check my bags. I get to the gate and I watch the plane leave. Now in 1989, I would have been 33. Is that right? 33. Yeah. So next time out, I got to Lake Eola and I never left. And I turned around and came home. The next time out, I didn't leave my house. And I called Scott. And I'm curled up like a baby in a fetal position. And Scott comes over and he's like, I said, Bud, can I just tell you what's going on? Yeah, I don't know. I called my sister-in-law, who is a clinical psychologist, and she says, I've been waiting for this phone call. And I said, what do you mean? Well, Cindy was pregnant with Carly. I had somehow transferred a feeling of abandonment that I had as a kid because of some time in the hospitals that I had for a consecutive period of time to I was abandoning my child. Okay. Now, that seems rather simple to decode and to try to get over, but the how that extrapolated itself in my life, it began that anxiety kind of generalized. So I got to a place where I wasn't able to travel in a job where travel was a prerequisite. So I finally said, if you want me, you have to come to me. And they came. And I didn't lose my job. And in fact, we flourished for a season. And it was amazing to me out of that, how the Lord used that, not only in my own life, but it gave me back to the inviting people into my story. I couldn't hide behind that. I could not hide behind the fact that I was required to travel and I wasn't traveling. So I have people in the office within me that, I mean, here that I'd go to. And I remember one guy comes in, he says, this thing's stuck on me. This one guy comes in and says, can I share with you something I've never told anyone? He's 34 years old, never told a soul, 3 kids, married for 12 years. And he begins to tell me something that he had hidden since he was 13. That had a direct connection. As soon as he told me, it all made sense to, oh, this is why you don't want to take the water taxi across the canal. It's only 5 minutes. You'd rather drive. Oh, this is why you want to call and know who the bus is so I can find out if there's a bathroom on the bus. I mean, it was, but this guy got released because he got pointed to some healing, if you will. So that gave me an illustration. It's kind of a long answer, but I'm telling you, it was, and I'll tell you, there was a day at this church when I stood up upstairs, and what probably was not the upper room now, but over here, and I got ready to do some announcements. I couldn't say anything, and for me, that was, let's say, destructive for me. And you have that happen one time, it keeps creeping back on you till you can work yourself out of it, right? So, but the Lord showed up in a very powerful way, and kept me in the role I was in, to the point of where I was able to walk away from it, and led me to this ministry, and then led me to a man who invited me in to come run his business for him for 12 years. So, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah,
It's great. Don. Elaborate on what it means to not be authentic and what it takes to be more authentic.
Well, we probably, if we all think, about our day in and day out, we can, a lot of us can, if we think about, I believe this, as men, a lot of us we live in a state of unsettledness and agitation because the guy we're looking at in the mirror is we realize we can't control the uncontrollable and make certain the uncertain, and that's agitating to us. So we basically have to give some semblance of appearance that we've got it all together, right? To the degree that you walk into a conversation with someone with a false front that basically, let's just say that you're just perpetuating this front that basically makes them think you've got everything together. Something as simple as that, when it's just a little turn of the dial to say, hey, Bill, man, I don't know if you've ever confronted this before, but I was thinking coming in here today, I know your name's not Bill, but I was thinking, man, I'm wrestling with trying to control the uncontrollable. You ever struggle with that? Boom. Ask a question. Boom. Now, Bill may say, no, I never do. Well, I am. Can I tell you a little bit about what that looks like for me? Some people may or may not have ears to hear that you're asking for at least some sense of consoling or comfort or just want to be an authentic conversation, right? But I will come back and say the greatest tool that I have found in my own life is to invite people into my story. And when that happens, I guarantee you there's people in here sharing that little bit that I share right there about having a panic attack. There's guys sitting in here that have and or do struggle with anxiety. And you know what? It's real. It's real, So what do? We put tools in a tool bag. We try to decode it. If you know that I deal with it, all of a sudden it takes the energy out of it. And now we can talk. If you've struggled, we can talk about it. Hey man, here's what I've done. How can I help you? here's a tool from my tool bag. Have you ever thought about that? Right? That makes sense. I mean, that's the kind of thing that for me has been most effective, to use that term. Not in a calculated way, but in a natural way. Just our story is one of our greatest assets that we're called to steward. Part of that is inviting people in.
Well, and what occurs to me as we got to wrap this up is that only when we have that relationship with the God of the universe, where we are forgiven, where we know that we are God's deeply beloved, redeemed sons, can I actually face my story and unpack parts of it with other people. And that's the gift that we all have. But God has modeled that in a powerful way with you, Jon. And I love your ministry of availability. It's not a ministry of accessibility, which
Right.
means nobody could just run into your office or drive into your driveway and say, Jon, I need some time.
Well, I want to, the way I distinguish the two of accessibility says the door is open, availability says I'll make time for you. Accessibility, I may not have time if you walk in the door. The door's open, so you walk in, but I may not have the time. So availability is, hey, it's an intentional design in everything I do to leave margin to be available. So, yeah, that's the distinction.
I like that. Now, stay seated while
Yeah.
I get something over here and wrap up. We've got to get everybody out of here because our time is limited. But Jon, I want to give you one of our first generation plaques. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now, this plaque is so big, Jon, that Cindy is not going to let you put it in the house anywhere. I want you to know, maybe over the garage door. But we want you to have this, and we want you to have our Forge Challenge coin, our honor coin,
Thank you, man.
where we want to thank you for being that man, one of those men in the greater Orlando area for 23 plus years, who has built a great family and who has invested in men. You've been a part of this movement that God is doing in the greater Orlando area, key part, and made a big difference. And so we honor you, and we challenge you to just keep it up because we need you in this.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm just on the leading edge of fourth quarter, 65 to 75, and I have a vision for overtime. So I'm beseeching the Lord to not call sudden death upon me. So I want overtime.
All right. That's great. Let me close it in prayer, and then you guys can talk to Jon. He's available here for 3 or 4 hours. And if you believe that, I do have some property I want you to look at today later. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Oh, thank you for the gospel. Thank you that you loved us so much that you sent your son. And Lord Jesus, that we have been transformed because by your Spirit, you have brought us to the end of ourselves. You've helped us to look at our own story and see that we needed you. Thank you for the language that Jon has given us today. Thank you for what you've done in his life. We honor you. Thank you for the men that he has been able to influence, and through him, the women, the children, the churches, the culture of our area through the strategic focus of developing men. And so, Lord, we honor you, we honor him, but we do pray that you would use his story to influence all of our stories, that as we head out, we would see how important we are. May my brothers in this room and who view this video see how important they are. May you free us in our lives to influence others in ways that you have used Jon. Give him overtime, Lord, we pray. And no sudden death, but overtime, Lord. Use him for your honor and glory in the greater Orlando area. We pray these things in the strong name of our risen Savior, Jesus Christ. And God's men said, amen. Guys, thank you for coming. Jon, thank you for coming.